Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Minds of Evil by Don Holton, directed by Timothy Combs. This six-part adventure seems to be a hit and miss with the fan base. Some people like it, some people don't. I am in the group that really enjoys this story. This is a phenomenal script that looks, is written and is acted extremely well. It sees the return of the Master. This will start a trend of every story in season 8 being a Master story, as he was in the last story and now he's in this story, and he's going to be in the next few stories. Second story with Joe Grant. I don't know, it's really like, but let's get on to the story. So, the Doctor is investigating this prison that's got this new device, the Kessler machine, I believe it's called. And he's investigating it because he's fascinated by the science of it. This machine which can reportedly take evil out of people, or something like that. The science is a bit mumbo-jumbo, the science is a bit more fantasy than it is like hard science. So when they say evil, I presumably means like they've done something to their brain that stops them getting like an adrenaline rush to stop like fighting. That's what my take on it is anyway. But the story is about a machine that basically removes a part of somebody to take evil away from them. And the Doctor says this machine is extremely dangerous. And we get a example as they take one of the inmates of the prison and basically alter his mind. Now, something goes wrong and he collapses, and when he comes back he can't remember anything, and he's basically got the mind of a child. But he is not violent anymore. He is a calm and collective individual who gains a sort of friendship with Joe Grant, and these two together, I really love their scenes. As I've mentioned in the previous story, The Terror of the Autons, Joe Grant really reminds me of one of the teachers that I had in school. She has that sweet, lovable, like you look at her and she smiles and you're just like, my God, she's so sweet and so innocent. And with this subplot of hers, it really emphasizes that supply teacher, sweet and innocent part of her. She is not Liz Shaw, she is Joe Grant. Katie Manning does a fantastic job here. She really emphasizes her Joe Grant's character in this story. Now, a thing to note as well, like with Inferno, another Don Holton story, this story is actually really like two stories that have been like Frankensteined into one, and it works off each other as a unit. They are investigating a peace treaty between the Americans and I want to say China. Yeah, I think it was China. And so there's this investigation as papers from the Chinese ambassador's gone missing, and later on he gets killed, which is bizarre because there was a man on guard at the door 24/7, so how did he die and stuff? And how did his papers get stolen? Now this is a big change to how UNIT was originally shown in the previous stories. This will start off a new trend for UNIT, as before UNIT was used as a sort of military action to alien investigations and supernatural stuff. But here they're used as more like a security guard for like peace treaties and government backings and stuff. So basically the United Nations part of UNIT becomes a big focus in their plots, and they start having more stories where they're more like used as a security facility. Now, this puts an emphasis to the huge James Bond feeling of this story. And there's also another element in which they have basically a nuclear gas bomb, and they know they shouldn't have it. This device has been illegal for at least 10 years now since the story has come out. And UNIT is basically planning on dropping it at the bottom of the ocean so that it can't affect anyone. However, the Master gets a hear of this, and he's trying to get it and trying to use this this problem with the Americans and the Chinese to basically fuel a war. So there's a lot of going on in this story, and the main focus is the prisoners stuff, but later on, like, it all like bumbles together, and it really suits phenomenally well. Fun fact, the actual prison bit with the whole mind control sort of stuff is actually a homage to the film A Clockwork Orange. It's got similar themes of what is free will if you try and take people's evil tendencies away, and is it like the same person, and can somebody really be forgiven? But here, as it is a family show, it's a bit more simplified, as they basically say, yes, you could, because this guy that they use the Kessler machine on, he basically is a good guy for the rest of the story. You never really see him turn bad, and he never and there's no causes for his bad actions in his previous life before the story takes place. So there's that for you, and it's got a great, it's just got a great feel. I love the scene of the prisons, and in a few times, I think it happens twice, it gets taken over by the inmates. One of them actually starts a rebellion with the Master, who is organising all this, and he makes a plan to use these guards, dress them up like, use these inmates, who've now taken over the prison, dress them up like policemen, and go and get the bomb, basically. So it all ties in together, and the Master's also controlling this Chinese girl. I can't remember the name of the girl, but she is played phenomenally by the actress that she's played by. And basically we find out that she's been mind controlled by the Master to take the papers and kill the ambassadors, as the Doctor and the Brigadier catch her before she kills the American ambassador. In a very silly scene where she basically can uses a sort of enhancer of the Kessler machine to absorb her fears of this Chinese dragon and make her basically appear as if she's a Chinese dragon, and that is what scares the American ambassador to almost death, but he survives, luckily for our heroes. Now there's a really strange scene that we never see again, is that at one point they speak a dialect of Chinese. I can't remember which specific one, but it's got subtitles to it, and it's a rare case. I think it's the only case where the Doctor's dialogue is subtitled. So that's a really cool note in this. But back to the stuff in the prison. The Master's basically trying to get in control of this device, which has now become slightly sentient, and is trying to eat as many evil minds as possible. That sounds really ridiculous, but bear with. And he basically gets the Doctor to try and work with him, and puts him into the room with it and to see what happens. The first time this happens, we see the Doctor basically catch on fire. He's afraid of... We see that one of the Doctor's biggest fears is being caught on fire. And he explains to Joe Grant later on that he has a memory of one of his previous adventures being caught, where everything is being caught onto flames. And he's basically seen an entire world burn and there's nothing he can do. And that's what brought on the fear. I don't know if this is a reference to a previous story. Hello, sorry to break the format. It's just that after I made this video, it came to my attention that that scene with the Doctor being caught on fire was one of his fears is actually a reference to Inferno, Don Holton's previous story. So I just thought I'd add that in here. So back to the episode. The second time we get it, however, we get some Easter eggs as when the Doctor's being shown his fears, we get the voice of a Dalek saying exterminate, exterminate, making it the first Doctor Who story of the third Doctor era to actually mention the Daleks. The Cybermen, which is the only real appearance they have in the third Doctor era, as he never met the Cybermen. An Ice Warrior, a War Machine from the War Machine, so that's really cool, and a Zarbi, which I find absolutely hilarious. Like, what? I mean, the other ones, fair enough. I mean, they were like really evil antagonists and stuff. But the Doctor being afraid of the Zarbi? What? I mean, he had one as a pet in the Web Planet. So are you trying to tell me he's been walking around with like this thing he was just absolutely terrified with? Surprisingly, watching this back, I was surprised to discover, or should I say, remember, because I've seen the story a few times, but I forgot that they don't mention spiders, because in a later story we find out one of the Doctor's greatest fears is spiders, sort of. And there's also a great moment where the Doctor becomes extremely ill and he's lying on the bed and Joe Grant's basically looking after him. Another great Joe Grant moment of her sweet and innocent character just shining off the screen. And it reminds me a lot of the Planet of the Spiders with the third Doctor regenerating. Very sad, very somber, but here we get he recovers, so there you go. John Pertwee does a fantastic job of playing the Doctor in this one. I like how sarcastic he is at the start of the story and how he's determined to get this Kessler machine destroyed. And then when the stuff gets serious, he gets really serious. And when he's talking to the Chinese ambassador, the new one, as the Brigadier gets the Doctor on board to try and help him sort negotiations out, the Doctor is very playful with the Brigadier as he basically ignores him throughout the discussion. So a lot of great Doctor Brigadier moments. The Master, Robert Delgado, this is probably my favourite story of his. He owns the screen. Usually in these stories, the Master is sort of like a secondary villain. He's a great presence, he's always a great appearance in the story, and just Robert Delgado, that's all you really need to say, and you know this story is great. But here it's his biggest role in the series, I think. So if you want to see a Master story, I highly recommend this story. It is a highly Master-focused story. And his plan of using the Kessler machine and his plan of basically controlling the prison feels very mastery. There's no explanation of why he does any of this. He's just a villain. He's just super evil, and you're so convinced that you don't question it. It is probably his most Blofeld-y a villain from James Bond kind of appearance in this story. And one of my favourite scenes is actually he's basically discovers the Kessler machine cannot be controlled. There's no way he could really take command of it, so he tries turning it off. But when he's there, he basically gets shown his greatest fear. And it shows the Doctor, John Pertwee, as a giant like ghost thing, just laughing his arse off to the Master. That is absolutely hilarious. Kim, I'd like to see a story where the Doctor defeats the Master by basically just laughing at him, and the Master has some sort of nervous breakdown. How cool would that be? And it really fits his character as well. That he's so against the Doctor, and he just enjoys just basically playing around with him. That to see him basically beat him with such ease. To the point where the Doctor is laughing at him. Just a fantastic scene, a fantastic moment. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of going on in this story. And like I said, a lot of people don't like this story. I think maybe, I still argue this is a fantastic story, and I'd watch this over and over and over again. But I think one of the criticisms you can put onto it is that there is so many plot points going on. Maybe each of them suffer as a result, as some don't get enough screen time and enough focus for them. For example, this whole thing with the bomb. It's set up very well, very nicely and stuff, but because it's not set up like a lot and stuff, when it becomes the main focus at the end, with the Master basically got it and he can use it to destroy the world, basically, by setting it in a certain place in Europe. I can't remember where, but it all makes sense in the story. It kind of feels strange. You kind of think that the Kessler machine, which was the big focus of the earlier half of the story, would have been the main focus, but by the end of the story, it just kind of comes as a sort of subplot, and the prison gets less and less focus, which is okay. It's, stories develop and stuff throughout the runtime, but something about it here feels less like it's a natural progression and more of the writers and producers and directors just slowly forgetting about it, if that makes sense. But yeah, Timothy Cobb's directing here as well might be a bigger issue, as in Doctor Who and the Silurians, he shot a lot of the stuff in the dark and it works really well. Here though, a lot of it takes place in daylight and a lot of it is in bright, colourful rooms, which means that when we get to the fear aspect, the story is about people's fears and stuff, it doesn't really strike out that much as it should be. We should have had a lot more darker scenery in this story, especially when we get to the stuff with the inmates. But I don't think it's a bad looking story by any stretch of the word, but it's just a little bit too bright, and it might come off as a little bit cheesy, a little bit like, oh yeah, it's the 70s, of course it looks like that. But it's still an issue, it's still something I think a lot of people might be disinterested in with this story. The over brightness of and over cleanness of the directing of it. It should have taken a little bit more risks with its camera movement and just lighting in general. So there you go. So that's The Mind of Evil. Great. In my opinion, it's a fantastic story. Maybe not in my top 10 Third Doctor stories, but I still think it's a great watch and I highly recommend it. I will, though, have to state that there are a few people in the fan base that don't consider the story any good and think it's a really weak entry into the series. So keep that in mind, and I think if you think this little story looks interesting, do check it out. But if you don't, I wouldn't worry about it if I was you. I think that it's just one of those stories that you've got to be interested in the subject matter to really elevate the watching experience. So that's The Mind of Evil. So join me next time where we get introduced to one of the most memorable one-off villains in the series for some reason, because they keep getting mentioned and stuff. But anyway, so join me next time where we will watch The Claws of Axos. So I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. See you then.